This talk is about Jakarta E10, and I've subtitled it Simplicity for Modern and Lightweight Cloud Applications. And I'll do some of the cloud stuff as well, and but I'll focus on the simplicity and the lightweightness of it. My name is Ivar Grimstad, and I work for the Eclipse Foundation as the Jakarta E developer advocate. And I'm a Java champion and also involved in a bunch of other open source communities. And these are my contact information, so if you want to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or GitHub, then feel free to do so and interact with me if you have any questions. And Jakarta E10 was released last week. So this is the most recent release of Jakarta E. It's the first release that are actually giving us some functionality. The other has been kind of more get the plumbing right kind of stuff. But E10 brings a lot of new stuff. And by stuff, I'm meaning specifications. So Jakarta E is all about these specifications. We also talk about the implementations, but when in the context of Jakarta E, it's the specifications. And what do we mean by a specification? So the specifications we make are usually a document of some sort, a PDF or an HTML page that describes how this technology is going to work. And also, there are usually some API artifacts, something you can get from Maven Central, some APIs. And we have a test compatibility kit. That is a set of tests that the API is implemented and the specification is implemented correctly by an implementation. And when you pass all the tests, you are a compatible implementation. And in order to make a final specification, we need at least one open source compatible implementation. So this is not just kind of paperware or anything. It's actually proven that it's implementable and it's usable. And there can be more compatible implementations, but at least one. And Jakarta E10, as I said, is a bunch of new stuff. These are all the specifications that are part of the Jakarta E platform. And all the blue ones are the ones that are updated in this release. So you can see that the majority of them have updates. The majority, and about half of those with updates are a .0 release. That means that they are a major upgrade from previous version. And those with the .1 behind them are minor updates from the previous versions. And also the major update may signal that it's not necessarily backwards compatible. So there may be things you have to consider when you move from some release up to a major release, because we're trying to enforce semantic versioning for this. And so these are all the specifications. The gray ones are the ones that didn't receive updates for this release. They're still there and they still work and you can use them. And it's part of the platform, but they weren't updated for this release. Some of them are stable, some of them will never be updated, some of them will be updated for the next release. And we have a new specification called CDI Lite, which I'll go into details on a little later. So if we remove some of the more enterprisey kind of specifications, we're left with the Jakarta E10 web profile. And this is a subset of the platform where it's more focused on the traditional web applications. And if we remove everything that has to do with creating the traditional web applications, we're left with a stack of specifications that are targeting headless services or microservices, if you want. And that's the brand new Jakarta E10 core profile. The platform and the web profile has been with us. The web profile was introduced in Java EE6, so it's been with us for a long time. And core profile is new in Jakarta E10. And as you see, these are the specifications that you would use to create a microservice. Another thing we did with E10 was to raise the API level. So the language level is raised to Java SE11. And that means that in order to use Jakarta E10, you have to use at least Java 11. But you can use newer versions, and most of the implementations are using a newer implementation. And the key here is that we made sure that the TCK are possible to run with both 11 and 17. So anything between 11 and 17 you can use in the implementations. And some of the implementation doesn't even bother to support 11, and some of them support both. So you just choose which implementation you want based on one of the parameters could be the Java level. So let's look at some of the specifications, and I'll go through, not all of them, just be relaxed, I won't go through it all, but I'll do some of them. And let's start with security. And Jakarta security is a major update. That's because they deprecated some stuff, and they also want to signal that we're adding something new, so it's kind of a major thing. But the kind of the basis of this is to make a foundation for future work. And the major thing that they added was to add support for OpenID Connect. So now you use OpenID Connect in a standard way. You may have used OpenID Connect with Java EE and Jakarta EE before, and that's fully possible, but it's done in a vendor proprietary way. And now you have a standard way of doing this. The other updates were more, as I said, a foundation for future works with updates to the other specifications within the security space, which is authorization and authentication. And this is how you will, it's a subset of the parameters you can use for the OpenID Connect authentication mechanism. And as you see, the annotation is fairly verbose, but that also makes it very clear what it does. So if you annotate your configuration with @OpenID authentication mechanism definition and add the parameters, these are typically something you could use for, and you can use expression language to configure your provider and whatever other stuff you need to configure your OpenID Connect in your system. And this is the server-side part of it. So this is how you would do it on the server application. The client API is not specified by Jakarta EE. That is something you would use some client API to do it, but it's a standard way. So. Let's also look at persistence. And Jakarta persistence is a 3.1 release. That means it's not breaking anything. They're just adding features and evolving the API. And one of the things that added is now standard support for UIDs as a basic Java type. So you can now use, for example, in this case, I've used the primary key generated UID. That's up to you whether you think that's a good idea or not, but you can use it in any field in your entities and use the Java util UID as a type directly, and it will map correctly to the database, and you don't have to do that mapping yourself. RESTful Web Services. They also did a minor release. They initially planned for doing some breaking changes by fully going all CDI, but they decided that was a little bit too much for them now, so they wanted to keep compatibility with backwards but update with some stuff that the community has requested. And one of them are standard support for multi-part form data. So now you can upload files to Jakarta REST in a standard way. You may have used REST-easy to do this or Jersey APIs to do this before, but now we can do it standard and move between the implementations as you like. And another kind of cool thing is they added a Java SE Bootstrap API, and this is something that has been requested by a lot of people. Because when you're using Jakarta REST applications, traditionally you would deploy it into a WAR file and run it in an application server. But this makes it possible to just create a jar file with the dependencies you need and run it directly as a jar, Uber jar or whatever jar you're using. And this is sort of what you do. You just add some configuration, initiate it, and start it. And I'll show a short demo of that. So I have this demo application. I'll show the link to the GitHub afterwards. And this one is it's a standard jar. So the packaging is jar. It's not using a WAR. In this case, I'm using the Maven assembly plugin. You use Shade or whatever you use to package a jar. I just copied this from somewhere else. And you can see I'm using Jakarta REST provided so to have the APIs available for me when I'm coding it. And in this case, I'm using REST-DC, and I'm using REST-DC core, undertow, and the JSON binding to get the JSON output properly. And the source code is, as you would expect, a typical REST application where you have the add path annotation to give the path of the resource. It is GET request, and it produces application JSON, and it has this text message there. And the actual application is just the regular Jakarta REST application. So if I want to make this a runnable jar, I need a main method, and I need to initiate my application. So what I do here is to add a main method. And when I've done that, the first thing I'm going to do is to configure it. So I set up the SE Bootstrap configuration, and this has a Fluent API. So in this case, I'm just defining the root path and the port number. There are lots of other stuff you can configure there, depending on your needs. This is just a simple example. The next thing is to just instantiate the app, and in this case, I'm using the application to do this. I could have used any main method anywhere in my jar. It's convenient to use this one. So I instantiate the application, and the last thing is to start it. So, and then I call the SE Bootstrap static method start, pass in the app and the configuration, and then say, hey, run until I press Ctrl+C. Let's try this one. I'll open the terminal here. Just go up there. Buddy Duke. I'll package. Actually, I should use verify since Andres is saying use verify, but I'll use package just to annoy him. So I'll oh sorry, didn't play in package there. Oh, again. I hate these tables that aren't flat, but yeah. So yeah, but what you need to remember also is to check what your IDE is saying, of course. So here I haven't caught the exception, so I'll just go ahead and do that. There you go. There, compile it again, and it produces a jar for me. So you can see I have this Burido jar with dependencies. So I'll just run it from a command. Target. This is not my day. Why isn't it dash jar target? There we go. So sorry about this. There you go. So it starts up, and you see it starts fairly quickly. It's up and running on port 8081. So I can go to localhost 8081 Budiduk, and it says hello from Bootstrap. So it's fairly simple. If you want to add CDI, if you want to add other stuff, you need to add dependencies. So if you're kind of familiar with how you would do it in a Spring application, you would add all dependencies that you need in sort of way, and that's what you have to do here. Add the APIs and the implementations. So So it's neat stuff to get something up and running quickly. I don't know if I will run any real production stuff in it, but that depends. So it's a cool thing. It's a cool addition, and the community really wanted it. And this is just how the application was configured. So let's look at core profile. And Jakarta core profile, the kind of the key element or the key message with behind the core profile is to target smaller runtimes. And the core profile is a small set of specifications, as I say, and so you would probably have what you usually recognize as big application servers that supports everything. The core profile can support only these specifications. And the potential Jakarta core profile compatible application servers or implementations are some of these listed here. We know that none of them are supporting core profile yet. Currently, we have Open Liberty, Wildfly, and Pyara is implementing core profile. But these are, and that are more traditional application servers. These are the ones that are actually more targeted by core profile and the idea behind it. And another element that these implementations support is also why we had to create a lighter version of CDI to enable this core profile. And the CDI Lite is kind of also within that message from core profile is designed to work in more restricted environments. So we have smaller runtime, more restricted environments. And with more restricted environments, what we're meaning is that we want to be able to compile to native. And with CDI, which is so dynamic by nature, lots of the stuff are discovered at startup or runtime of the application server. And we want to be able to do that dynamic stuff at build time. So that also made us need a new extension API, so we could have compatible extensions that were initiated at build time rather than at startup time, as the portable extensions are today. And also, they changed the behavior of Beans XML from being all to annotated, and I'll show a demo why how this affects you. And also removal of some deprecated API parts. Introduction of a new language model as well to support all of this. And I'll demo this in a bit. But before I demo that, I just want to take a step backwards. And because I realize that not everybody is on E10 or even E9 today. You're probably on Java E earlier versions. So what I'm going to do is to take you from E8 and up to 10. And show how to do that. And I'll start by having a Jakarta E8 application and convert it to Jakarta E9. And the thing or the obstacle of doing that is the namespace change. And I'll show you that is not a hard thing. It's not that difficult to do. It's fairly quick. And there are some tricks you can use to make it even quicker. And if you're not using Jakarta, why should you care about this namespace change? And well, it turns out that the entire industry is affected by this. So if you're using Spring and expecting to upgrade to Spring 6 later this year or Spring Boot 3, you are going to notice that some places in your application you have to upgrade from JavaX to Jakarta. If you're using bean validation, Jakarta persistence, or something else, Hibernate is on Jakarta namespace. Also, if you're just having a regular Java application running in Jetty or Tomcat, and you want to stay on the latest version, well, you need to upgrade because the latest version of Jetty and Tomcat are on the Jakarta namespace. And there are, as I said, some tricks you can do this. And one of them is transformation. And with transformation, we're talking about taking the bytecode and just transform it on bytecode level, so you don't even have to touch your code. You can take an application that is on the JavaX namespace, run it through one of these transformers, Eclipse transformer or the Apache Tomcat migration tool, and there are some other options out there as well. Run them through this, and they would fix the bytecode for you, and you can deploy it into a Jakarta 9 server. That's fairly quick. You can also use IDE support. IntelliJ has this migration refactoring things. I can take you from Java EE to Jakarta EE. It should have been from JavaX to Jakarta, but it does the thing for you. And you can also notice that it won't do the JavaX namespace packages that are not affected, because there are still JavaX namespaces in the JDK. So you cannot do a search and replace all of your application. You have to be a little careful what you replace. Or you can do it manually and just follow these 6 steps. And these 6 steps may sound a lot, but I'll show you that it's not that much. It's, I'll go through each and one of these steps in a demo. And to do this demo, I've created this Hello World application. And also, rather than just creating a simple Hello World application that is just a one-liner like the SE Bootstrap one, I've created one that is more realistic, how your more enterprise application would look like. It has a database. I'm using Jakarta Persistence to retrieve data from the database. I have Jakarta Enterprise Beans, which is known as EJBs, to have some business logic around it. And I'm using Jakarta REST to produce a JSON output through a REST API. I also threw in a CDI extension in case you're using CDI extensions. Anyone using CDI extensions or writing them? No, so I'll go through that step fairly quickly then. So these are the steps. And step 1 and 2, I'll use the IDE to do that for me, so that's fairly quickly. Let's open the slightly more complicated Complete Duke application and have a look at it. And as you can see here, I'm using Java SE8, and I'm having a Jakarta E8 application. The application itself, it's fairly simple. The configuration is actually the same as the one I showed you for the SE Bootstrap example. And I'll just go there. The greeting resource is the same here. I have the @get, HTTP get, prison JSON output. It's using an EJB to get to find the message. And the EJB is injecting a repository class, going through everything I find in the repository, pick the first one, or else hardcode. So that's my business logic. In the repository, I'm using Jakarta Persistence, and you can see I inject the entity manager here, and I'm using criteria language to do the selects for me. It would be the same if you're using SQL directly or some template for doing that. And the actual entity is a table called greeting, just 3 columns, an ID, message, and an email. And that's what I'm publishing. Then it was the CDI extension. I have this Duke's annotation that I'm annotating the resource and just saying hi there. And the actual extension is just looking for that annotation and printing in the system out. So that's about it. So let's convert this one to Jakarta E9. And what I do then is to take this dependency, I'll just copy it and upgrade it to 9.1. So now I have both the dependencies, one for JavaX and one for Jakarta. I'll reload with POM, and then I'll use the refactoring menu here, and it says migrate packages and classes Java EE to Jakarta, and I'll just use the complete Duke, and I'll run it. And I'll just do the refactoring, and you can see all the classes changed here, and what's been changed is the imports. So it's done everything for me. And what I can do then is, since I'm not using anything JavaX related, I can just remove this dependency. And I'm done. So that's how simple it is to do the migration from JavaX to Jakarta. Or that's the 2 first steps of it. Of course, there are more. And we have the XML namespaces. And you may use some XML configuration in your application. Not necessarily much, but you usually have small stuff. So I'll go through the XML files I have in my application. And the only one I'm actually using is the persistent XML to define the data source. And the persistent XML is here, you can see it uses the jcb.org namespace. So the change we've done is to, first, we're adding HTTPS to the namespaces. And I'm also using jakarta.ee rather than jcb.org. And I need to switch the schema location as well. And this is where you can do search and replace, so you don't mistype, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to do now, but I'll try to get it right. And also, a common practice is to have the for us is to have the version name in the schema namespace file. So this is 3.0. And now you can see the validation kicked in and says that, hey, the version isn't correct, so I have to upgrade to 3.0. And that's it. So for each and one persistent XML file or XML file you have, this is what you need to do. The next step is you may have some properties scattered around the application that are prefixed with JavaX. And you may notice that in my persistent XML file, I have these to generate the test data. And I'm dropping and creating the table, and I'm inserting my test data. So and this one are prefixed with JavaX. So what I do here is to replace it with Jakarta. So it's not very hard changes. You just need to know where to do them. And if you have other properties scattering around applications somewhere around, you need to change these properties as well. The sixth step is if you have some bootstrapping files. And nobody were implementing CDI extensions, as I gather, but you may be using some extensions in your application. And the way extensions are bootstrapped in Jakarta-E is to have a file that is called JavaX Enterprise Inject SPI extension. And this file, the only thing it contains is the fully qualified class path to your extension. So you may be using some other extensions, or you may have some libraries that have some extensions in them that you have to fix. The way you fix this is to rename this file. And as you probably guess, it's from JavaX Enterprise to Jakarta Enterprise. So it's very consistent what you are renaming. It's JavaX to Jakarta all the way. So that was that. The sixth step, verify data in dynamic context. I'll show that by first running my application. So what I'm going to do is to take deploy it into Glassfish 6, which is a Jakarta 9 compatible implementation. So I'll choose the artifact, the complete dict war file, and I'll deploy it to Glassfish and run it there. So, and here you can see we get this hi there message, which is from the CDI extension. So the log stuff works. And let's look at the application. And Glassfish this one is running on 8082, and I have complete dict, and it says, hello, Jakarta EE8. Wait a minute, we're on 9. And this is the dynamic stuff. So my test data here is generating is generating my message being Jakarta E8. So what I can do there is to go in and open the database, new query console, take select from greeting, just run it, and you can see it has the howdy Jakarta E8 message. So I'll write here howdy Jakarta E9.1 message, and commit it to the database, and now the dynamic data has been fixed. And this message is kind of a stupid example, but you may even concatenate properties, So if you concatenate some strings and create some JavaX property names from your database or somewhere else dynamically, this is where you have to fix it. It could be in your code that you concatenate strings. So that's what I mean with dynamic data. It's kind of know your applications and know where to fix them. So that wasn't that hard, was it? let's move on and take this application and move it from 9 to 10. Sorry. And also look at the Jakarta E10 core profile. And I'm going to use the same application. And when I do it with the core profile, I'll just remove some stuff that isn't supported by the core profile. Let's first take this application and upgrade it to 10, and then look at core profile afterwards. So what I'm first going to do is just take these, drop and create the table and that stuff, just comment it out because I don't want to go in and change the database every time. And then I'll go and take my application here. But before I do that, let's raise the Java level. That is fun. So let's try 17. Because Jakarta 9, some of the implementations support 17. So let's go from drop 11 and go directly from 8 to 17. Because that is something you really want to do because you want to use some 17 features in your application. And what favorite Jakarta 17 features do you want to see in Jakarta 9? Records, maybe? Well, it's actually Jakarta 16, Java 16, but since it's LTS, let's do it in 17. And what you noticed here is, what I'm doing here is returning the Dukes greeting, which is my database entity. And I'm using JSON binding to generate the JSON output. But showing my database structure in the REST interface is not a very good idea often. So you have some kind of mapping, whether you call it a value object or a DTO or something, you usually do some mapping between your database stuff and whatever you produce through your API. So let's do that and add a record to do that for us. So I'll add a Java class. I'll use a record. I call it Dukes greeting record. There. In this record, I'll have a let's have a string message and a local date date. And this is how you define a record. I don't need to do a getter and setter and hash code and whatever. This is the simple way of creating a record. And what I want to do is to return this record from my REST interface. And in order to do that, I also need to fix my business logic to have this one return a record. And this is where the magic happens, because here I'm calling the repository, I'm finding the database entity, and here is where I want to find the first greeting, and then I'll map it to a record. And I'll get the greeting message, and I'll use local date of now. And I also have to fix the hard coding in case there are nothing in the database. So this has to be a record as well. It can have the hi message, but rather than undefined as a date, I'll also use local date now just for simplicity. So here I'm adding some advanced business logic here. I'm doing a mapping from an entity to a record. Let's deploy this one to my the Glassfish server and see how it goes. What do you think? What will it print? An empty JSON. That's not what we wanted. Why is that? Well, since E9 doesn't truly support 17, the JSON binding is relying on the Java bean property, and a Java bean expects a getter, something gets something, And the record I created has a method called data and a method called message. It's not get data and get message, so it doesn't discover them. And there's a way to fix that, or there are several ways to fix it. I could create a mapper, and I can do all kinds of advanced JSON-B stuff. But the simple way is just rename your variables to get message and get data, and then simply redeploy. And then it finds it. So that's a hack if you want to use 17 with 9. Some of the implementations actually fixes this, so you don't have to do it. So, but what we were doing is to move this one from 9 to 10. So I'll go into POM file. We're already on 17, let's stay there. But rather than having Jakarta 9, I want to have 10, 0, 0. Refresh my POM, and let's deploy it into Glassfish, because here there are no namespace changes or anything I have to fix. So let's just deploy it directly after upgrading the version and go with it and see if it works. Deploy. And it says it is deployed. Let's go to the 8080, complete Duke, hello. And it says, oh, server error. So what was this? Well, the log file gives a little bit more, but it's still a lot of stuff. But if you look at this log file somewhere, it's going to say that I couldn't instantiate something. And that is an indication that this is, even though it's EJB in the log file here, when it cannot inject stuff, it's usually something CDI related. And if you remember back, we changed the behavior of beans XML. So an empty beans XML needed that, meant before that everything is injectable. But an empty beans XML now means that it has to be annotated with CDI annotations to be injectable. So let's add an empty beans XML and see how that goes. So I'll just add a XML configuration file. Oh, not there. I'll probably have to go to the source of the project, new. Why didn't I get a beans XML file? Is it here I have to be? There. Beans descriptor. I add an empty beans XML, and you can see this one has the correct Jakarta namespace, but it points to CDI 3, so I'll upgrade that to CDI 4. And also you can see it has bean discovery mode all, and now the default is annotated. Or I can just I can just remove that line entirely. And if I now deploy this application again, it should hopefully work. So now it even says the hi there stuff. So it is actually the CDI extension that wasn't enabled. It has nothing to do with the EJB or anything, but now it's returning what it's supposed to do. But here you can see now it's probably get date and get message, right? So what we want to do to fix that is to rename back our variables that we called get message and get date. So now we can go back to being kind of neat again. So we can remove this ugly hack. Just redeploy it. And now it says data message. So now we're there we should be. All right. 15 minutes left. Core profile. Let's look at this application in core profile. And I won't go through the CDI extension other than just point out the differences, since it's not that common to actually use much CDI extensions. You use it when you create libraries and when you create kind of modules to the application servers, but as an application developer, it's not that often you actually use CDI extensions, but they are there, and it's good to know that they are there. So in this example, I'm creating a WAR file, and I'm having the Jakarta core API, so it's not the platform or the web anymore, it's just the core. And I'm having it as a provided dependency. My application here is exactly the same as the other one, just I don't have the database. So the hello resource is just calling the service. And in this case, I'm using CDI because EJB is not supported. So I'm using CDI for the Duke service, and the Duke's service is not a stateless ended bean. It's session bean. It's just a rescoped CDI bean, and this one is just hard coding the howdy Corduc message. So it's a simpler application. The extension here is a little bit different because this is the new language API introduced in CDI 4. So this one has a more modern way of creating extensions rather than the old school way of doing to implement a method in an interface and doing this kind of observing stuff that is happening. It now has this. It implements a build compatible extension rather than the CDI extension, and you have some annotated lifecycle events that you can hook into. So this is more advanced stuff. It does the same thing. It just does it in a more modern way, and it's build compatible. If you're not using core profile, the recommendation is to use the old way because that's fully portable, always. And it's more powerful. But this is a difference. The other difference is that if you remember, this bootstrapping file was called Jakarta Enterprise Inject SPI extension. In a build-compatible extension, it's called a slightly more longer name. It's Jakarta Enterprise Inject Build-Compatible SPI Build-Compatible extension. But you don't need to remember that because that's actually exactly the same as the interface you're implementing. So it's just to copy the import here if you're creating a file manually. So it's not that hard to remember. That's the difference. Let's run this one in Wildfly. And this is the Corduc. Let's add it and deploy it. And it does the message stuff. And the display here, 883 Corduc, hello, and it says howdy Corduc. So it works as fast. It does its thing. It's a very limited API, but it's the core. And if I wanted to, I could use some GraalVM and compile it to native and run it, assuming the runtime supports native compilation. And I think Wildfly does. Quarkus and Helidon and those definitely support it. So I talked about cloud, and we have some cool stuff out there. There are several options, but this is the one I particularly like. And that is something called Payara Cloud. And Payara Cloud is very cool stuff to use. I have unfortunately, it only supports Jakarta 8 at the moment, but they are constantly working on it, and it's a trial, so it can be kind of hiccupy. But anyway, the application here is the same application that I have, even simpler. It just has this resource that has a message I produced. But otherwise, from that, it is exactly the same. I'm using Jakarta 8 for this one. So I'm creating a WAR file. And the way Payara Cloud works is that you kind of set it up by creating a namespace. I've done that already. It's called Duke's Demo. And from here, I want to kind of upload my application. And if internet is on and everything works as it should do, the way to do this, I'll just refresh this page and hope for the best. There we go. So what I do here is choose the file I want to upload, and I have the SUSE Duke WAR that I just showed you. I'll deploy it immediately. I have more options, and I could give give it a name. Otherwise, it would just get the file name. So I'll call this one SUSE Duke and upload, and it will deploy automatically. So you see, what I've done so far is to deploy my WAR files into an application server I'm running here locally. What I could have done is to set up Docker and do it in Docker. I could have set up Kubernetes and run it in Kubernetes or OpenShift, but who likes to configure stuff? I mean, YAML, really? And so we're application developers, and we want to just code the stuff in Java and upload it, and somebody else can take care of however it's configured. And that's what Payara does here. It's running in Kubernetes on Azure, most likely. And they've just provisioned stuff and set it up for me. So I just create the WAR file, I drop it to the cloud, and it runs. Isn't that how we want it? Can it be simpler than that? Yeah, so let's go and look at this application, and it says, hello, and it says Duke's in the mood for sushi. So see, this is how I uploaded this application in Kubernetes in the cloud. How many seconds? If I talked less, it would be 2 seconds. With the talk, 15 seconds. So this is how simple Jakarta E is in the cloud when you use the bare minimum of configuration. Of course, you can configure this more set of data sources and stuff that you usually need, but it's fairly simple to do it, and you do it once. Let's spend a couple of minutes looking beyond 10, because now, let's face it, 10 is old stuff. That's last week. We're now looking at 11. And 11, the work there has already started. We're looking at the goals and what to do with 11. And some of the things we are discussing right now, and that is, should we raise the Java SE level? Should we go and say that Java 17 is required and allow all APIs to use whatever you want to do of 17 features? That makes sense in the APIs. In the implementations, we can already use it. E10 will probably be out when Java SE 27 is the LTS, current LTS. And that's just a year away. So should we even raise it to 21? Maybe not, but we should at least make sure it runs on 21. Because if you know, in 19-ish, they did some changes with the security manager, and that's going to cause problems for us. So we need to figure out a way how we can mitigate that and make sure that the application runs as secure as they do today, portable from previous versions, and running on 21. So I'm pretty sure the TCK will run on at least 21. And language level, most likely 17. Jakarta config is an ongoing project. It's standardizing portable configuration across the environment of resources. You may know it from Spring config or microprofile config. It's a project that is going, and the specification there, I hope they can do some release before 11 and some extended release when 11 is released. But we'll see how they go. The project is set up, it's going, and they are having discussion weekly in their calls. So if you want to join there, please do. Jakarta MVC is I'm particularly interested in because I was the spec lead for MVC at the JCP, and we also do develop MVC. We just released, or are going next week to release MVC 2.1 that will be a part of Glassfish. So if you're running Glassfish, you don't need any extra dependencies. You can just use Jakarta MVC with Glassfish. It's server-side rendering at its best. It's action-based model view controller. So just wait. In a couple of years, when JavaScript is out and server-side rendering is back, MVC is going to be the thing. We don't know if this is going to be a part of web profile yet. We'll have to have a discussion on that, but it's a standalone spec, and it works like a charm. And it builds on Jakarta REST. It's just a couple of annotations like at controller, and then you have a MVC controller. And at view, you have a view defined. This is the JSP. Of course, we support more modern view engines than that. Jakarta NoSQL is standardizing integration with NoSQL databases. That's an ongoing project. They have a beta 4 out or something. So that is something we hope to have ready for E11. We have a new spec defined for gRPC called Jakarta RPC, and That work is just started. They have some foundation they want to use, but and I think they have submitted the initial contribution to the GitHub repositories. But it's an ongoing new specification, hopefully in 4.11. Jakarta Data is a brand new initiative, and that will standardize the repository pattern for data access. So that will also work with Jakarta NoSQL as well as Jakarta Persistence, and it will kind of work the same way as you probably used to with Spring Data. So you define the interface and it generates everything for you. This is my little, everybody who wants can support, can come up with a proposed specification. I haven't proposed this yet because I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but shouldn't we have some functions, support cloud functions, standardized so you can move your code between cloud providers who want to invent this stuff every time you switch cloud provider? So maybe Jakarta functions make sense. I don't think this will be anything for E11 or 12 or 13 or anything, but it could be a standalone spec that could be fun to develop. So please chime in if you like it. To sum up, E9 was all about the namespace. We're past that. It's easy to migrate. Like, it's just to follow these 6 steps, and you're on 9. And 9 is no place you want to be, so we want to go to 10, and 10 has a lot of new stuff. And the migration from 9 to 10 is very easy. It's only the CDI thing that you need to think of. Core profile is new if you want to create small applications. Compile to native, microservices. Core profile is the place to go. We support language level SE11 if you want to use newer. I know they are testing Bassfish on SE19 now, and it probably will run and pass the TCK on 19 eventually. The TCK still has to be updated to cope with the security manager issues introduced there, but at least 17 is no problem to use. Resources, go to jakarta.de. There you can find everything about Jakarta. Jakarta Blogs is an aggregator for blog content. With it doesn't have to be Jakarta related even. So if you have a blog, if you want to have it syndicated through this aggregator and spread to the wide masses, it's easy to sign up for this. Just provide the RSS feed of your blog, and you will get your name, and your blog post will appear there automatically. I have a blog. It's also on Jakarta blog, but I have my own domain as well, and I do weekly #JakartaEs, so there you can find the latest information on what's going on in the community. The demo for this application is on Jakarta Eduk on my GitHub. Just Google Jakarta Eduk, and I'm pretty sure this is the first hit you'll get. So thank you very much for listening, and it's 11:00, so that's good timing. Any questions? Yes.
You demoed in there how to like upgrade from like a lower level of Jakarta up to a higher one, and you talked about at the end getting up to Jakarta 10. Do you recommend going right from 8 to 10, or should you have that 9 as an intermediary, or what's the recommended path there?
Okay, so what's the recommended? I'll just repeat it for the video. So what's the recommended path from going from previous version like Jakarta E8 to 10? Should I do the intermediate step of E9.1? I would say I'll give the usual answer. It depends. And it depends because if your application is complicated and you want to make sure that the namespace change doesn't cause any complications for you, then I would do the intermediate step, because the only change there is the namespace. When you go from 8 to 9, it could be something else as well. So the APIs, everything is the same. So if you have a complicated application, I would do the 9.1 step in between, but then I would go to 10 and go to production. You don't need to go in production with 9.1. But as a migration step, that's probably a good idea, and test it. Yeah.